Every morning before sunrise, he parked his car in the far corner of the lot. Not because he wanted to, but because experience had taught him where he belonged in other people's eyes. The Mustang was old. The paint had faded unevenly, the engine hummed louder than it should, and the interior carried the smell of oil and cleaning chemicals. To most people, it looked like junk. To him, it was reliable. It was earned. And it was paid for in full. He worked nights as a janitor in a glass tower downtown, one of those buildings that looked powerful from the outside but felt cold once you were inside. His job was simple. Clean the floors. Empty the trash. Wipe away what others left behind. He never complained. Not because life had been easy, but because complaining had never changed anything. He was a single father. His son was 25, working 2 jobs, still chasing the kind of stability that always seemed one step out of reach. They shared a small apartment. Quiet dinners. Short conversations at the end of long days. They understood each other without saying much. That morning, something was different. The building buzzed with activity. Executives in tailored suits moved quickly through the lobby. Security stood straighter than usual. A major corporate inspection was underway. Investors were visiting. The CEO himself was expected to arrive. As he finished cleaning near the executive floor, he noticed people staring toward the windows. Cars pulled into reserved spaces, sleek, polished, expensive. Then the CEO arrived. The man stepped out confidently, his presence commanding attention without effort. People adjusted their posture. Smiles appeared instantly. Power had a way of doing that. That was when the Mustang rolled in. It backfired slightly as it slowed. The sound cut through the polished silence like a mistake. Heads turned. Someone chuckled. A few executives exchanged looks, amused, irritated. The car didn't belong there. And neither, in their minds, did the man stepping out of it. He wore his uniform. Slightly faded. Clean, but clearly worn by years of work. He closed the door gently, as if respecting something no one else did. The laughter wasn't loud, but it was intentional. Eyes followed him as he walked toward the building. Not curious. Judging. The CEO paused near the entrance. He looked once at the car. Then at the man. And the expression that crossed his face said everything. Disbelief. Dismissal. Mockery. No words were needed. The message was clear. This was not a man worth acknowledging. The janitor felt it immediately. That familiar tightening in the chest. That reminder that no matter how hard he worked, some people would never see past the surface. He lowered his gaze and kept walking. Inside, the inspection began. Executives spoke confidently about innovation, growth, and future plans. Numbers were discussed. Charts displayed. Everyone wanted to impress. The janitor moved quietly in the background, cleaning as he always did. Invisible. Ignored. Expected. But something else was happening, something no one noticed. The CEO's car had a problem. At first, it was subtle. A warning light. A strange sound when the engine started. Then it stalled completely. Confusion spread quickly. Security rushed over. Calls were made. A mechanic was requested. Time passed. Investors waited. The CEO grew irritated. The building prided itself on efficiency, but now everyone stood helpless around a car they couldn't fix. That was when someone noticed the janitor watching. Not staring. Observing. Quietly. His eyes moved between the engine bay and the dashboard, as if pieces were falling into place in his mind. One executive scoffed. What could he possibly know? But desperation has a way of lowering pride. Someone asked him, half joking, half dismissive, if he knew anything about engines. He didn't answer immediately. He looked at the car. Then at the faces around him. And for the first time that day, he stood taller. He stepped closer. He didn't touch anything at first. He listened. Then he reached in and made a small adjustment. The engine started. Perfectly. Silence followed. Not the comfortable kind, but the stunned kind. The CEO stared. Questions came fast. How did he know? Where did he learn that? The janitor wiped his hands calmly. He explained that years ago, before life took its turns, he worked in automotive engineering. That he had designed systems others now profited from. That choices, some his own, some forced by circumstance, had taken him elsewhere. The room shifted. The man they mocked was no longer invisible. But the real shock hadn't even arrived yet. Later that afternoon, as records were reviewed and background checks hurriedly pulled, the truth emerged. The janitor wasn't just experienced. He was the original designer behind a revolutionary engine system, one that had later been sold, repackaged, and scaled into a multi-billion-dollar industry. An engine that powered half the vehicles represented in that parking lot. The Mustang? It was a prototype platform. A personal test bed. Not junk. The silence this time was heavier. The CEO didn't speak. He didn't know how. Because everything he thought he understood about success, appearance, and worth had just collapsed. The janitor finished his shift that evening as usual. He clocked out. Walked to his car. No one laughed this time. But he didn't smile either. At home, he sat with his son at the small kitchen table. They ate quietly. Life didn't change overnight. But something had shifted. Not in the company, but in the people who witnessed that day. Because the story wasn't about a car. Or a job title. Or money. It was about how quickly people decide who deserves respect, and how wrong they often are. The question isn't how many brilliant minds are hidden behind uniforms. The question is, how many times do we judge before we understand? And how much does that cost us all? They laughed at him before he even opened the car door. A tired black janitor pulling into a corporate parking lot in an old Mustang didn't fit the image they respected. To them, it was just another broken car. Another man they could dismiss. But what they didn't know, what they never bothered to ask, was that this moment would expose their deepest assumptions. Because behind the grease-stained uniform was a truth powerful enough to shake an entire company. And when that truth finally surfaced, the humiliation didn't belong to him anymore. It belonged to everyone who judged him too soon.